Alexandra Kubica, senior researcher at the Bridge Group, is joining us now. Hello, Ola. Hi.
Hi, great to be here.
Great to have you. Tell us, what's your research focus and why the UK in the first place?
So the UK is amongst the countries in Europe with highest levels of income inequalities. It's also that there is low social mobility in the UK. So this means that people's background influences the chances they have in their education and in their career very much. But then thirdly also, we could say that the UK government is in a way obsessed with social mobility in their policy making. And there is also that means there is good level of awareness about what social mobility is and what it means for people in their careers. So this is what I research at the Bridge Group. We focus on the UK only, and we use research to promote social equality. And what we focus on is a socioeconomic background and its impact on employees in the broader framework of diversity and inclusion. And I know we will talk more about what that means. But I will just say that we do both quantitative and qualitative research, and my role is... Yeah, obviously. And my role is, as a qualitative researcher, I lead on the interviews with employees, usually with a team of colleagues, and then together with my quantitative colleagues, we come together and develop evidence-based recommendations for clients. And I think I want to say that, data is key to us, and it has already been mentioned at the conference a few times how important data is. So I'm glad that we can talk more about this.
Yes, a few dozen times.
And there aren't many organizations, in fact, that approach DEI from a data-focused perspective as much as we do, I think. So I would even argue there is not enough invested into understanding what works.
Data is obviously super important, but this is a very subtle conversation where data doesn't explain everything at all times as well. You mentioned you work from the UK, but I understand your research approach and methodology are not UK exclusive. So can this be applied to other countries? If yes, what's the impact, what are the consequences?
Yeah, so this is a very good question, but there's no easy answers because it depends on a number of things. So first of all, if we think about Poland as an example, the income inequality is not as high as in the UK. And also from what we know, the socioeconomic background does not play such an important role in people's careers. But then we don't know very much about this because there is not as much research on this as there is in the UK, for example. But if we put the cultural aspects aside, there is also money. So the company needs to know that they want to invest into researching this or research in general.
There needs to be a motivation, I understand.
There needs to be a motivation as well. And as Michalina was saying yesterday, they need to be ready that there will be some inconvenient truths that will be uncovered through the analysis. And not many companies might be ready for that.
The thing about truth, it's more often inconvenient than it is convenient, I suppose. But tell me, thinking about that, what kind of organizations do you work with? And I would imagine every important research has its own headlines. What are those headlines for you?
So the Bridge Group has been around for 10 years, and I've been working for them for more than 3 years. And so far we've worked with, I think, more than 130 firms, and they've all been in the UK. Most of our clients are from the professional sector, and that would include sectors like law, finance, or real estate. And we also work with consortia. And consortia are it's a useful way. Working with a consortium is a useful way of understanding what works in a sector and what the broader trends in the sector are.
Yeah, because you have a broader perspective.
Yeah, and
not just company specific.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and so we do a lot of that work with consortia as well. But in terms of the professional sector, so I guess you might wonder why do we focus on that more than other sectors? So the paths in this sector are linear, so it's we can more easily than perhaps elsewhere capture some key data and uncover the trends. And I guess what I want to say is that we work in a framework where we are assuming that there are some external factors, so in this case low social mobility in the UK, that the firm or a consortium may not have or has little impact on. But the awareness of these factors and also the awareness of the impact of these factors on the employee and the career that people can have, and translating this awareness into action through interventions, policies, can make a difference. So in other words, knowing what you cannot change can help in designing interventions that can realistically make a difference.
That's why I included the headline word in there, because obviously, so far so good. In principle, you have us convinced, but we talk about motivation on the part of consortia or companies. What kind of headlines have you already created in this field?
So yeah, maybe let me just share two. So we found that socioeconomic background has stronger impact, stronger effect on progression than ethnicity in some firms. And that's not to say that socioeconomic background is more important than other demographic characteristics, but that's to say that it does have an impact. So it's important to consider it in how progression happens and whether progression is fair. And then the second headline I would like to mention now is from the law sector, where we, in a sector we conducted with top legal firms, we found that legal trainees from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, so those with lower opportunities, and yeah, we'll talk more about what it means soon, they were much more likely to be amongst the highest performers in their firms compared with their peers from higher socioeconomic backgrounds.
Right.
So this means you don't necessarily need to, well, this might be surprising for some people, but that means that you don't necessarily need to be from the top university, and you don't have to be from a privileged family to do.
Well, all you need to understand that is watch Good Will Hunting, for instance. But it's just an example.
Yeah, I think it's more complicated than that, but I think we'll get to it.
Right. But we are talking essentially about this connection between socioeconomic background and career path, career prospects. It's kind of easy to imagine for most people, and the natural equation you would instinctively like to draw is the more hardship, the less privilege you experience in your early background, especially, the more difficult things are likely to be for you. Is it as simplistic as that, or does your research tell us a much more refined story?
So I think it's more complex. And I think I want to share maybe a story of how, maybe one example of how someone's education and then professional development, how someone from lower socioeconomic background can be impacted by how they grew up and what it means for their opportunities. So imagine that we have a teenage girl, let's call her Kate. She's in high school and she's soon going to do her A-levels, so final exams. And she's very bright, she's very ambitious as well. She would like to become a lawyer. And she's in a non-selective state school. So her teachers don't really know how to support her very well in terms of developing her university application, because she needs to submit an application to UCAS, she needs to develop a cover letter and a personal statement, it's called there. And so not many people from that school go to university, so the teachers don't know how to help her, and they also don't know how to help her to select the university that would be best for law. Her parents do manual labor, so her dad works in a factory, her mom is a cleaner. They are very supportive of her daughter, but they also don't have financial means to support her very much, so they're worried about what to do if she gets to university and how to support her then. She manages to get into a law degree at a university, but it's not a Russell Group university, so it's not one of the top universities. However, she graduates, and after a few attempts, she manages to get on a traineeship contract in London in one of the top firms. And now, if she has the support that she needs now, so if there are people who are understanding the unique challenges that people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds bring with them, then she might do as well as her peers from more privileged backgrounds. And so it may be things like networking experience. She's never lived in London, so helping her a bit around that, her presentation skills. It can also be about the awareness of how to be proactive and put yourself forward to be allocated work.
Ola, I know exactly what you're talking about. I myself come from a small town. I used to be petrified thinking about public speaking. I was the last person in my wonderful yet posh secondary school class to get a PC. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But at the same time, we get all those stories that are an exception to the rule. So what we are talking about here is obviously the general rule, to which there are lots of exceptions, people who overcome those difficulties and are strengthened by those difficulties. If you look at top technology execs, the biggest names on the planet, all of those stories started with some kind of hardship. So what is it that we're trying to say here, beyond the obvious fact that hardship makes it a lot more difficult to start your career?
So I think it's interesting to think about how these people then talk about their story once they progress further. They do talk about how hardship made them stronger, but then a lot of the people also would resign if they are not getting the support,
True.
if they are not getting the... Yeah, I guess it's not just about the skills, but it's also about the social aspect. So you think about, you think about moving to a big city like London, starting to live there, and then being among people that you don't even know how to talk to, because many of them have grown up going on holidays abroad, skiing, golfing, and eating out in restaurants. So it's also about understanding that there are challenges that come with it. And I think if a person gets support with developing these skills and gets sort of more time to also...
What kind of support specifically are we talking about? Because I get your point. It's really hard to disagree about any of that. It makes perfect sense. But what kind of support? Are we talking about the fact that we may be dealing with people who have enough talent, enough hard work, etiquette? They just need perhaps a little bit psychological support on their way, or they're not fitting into any social milieu they want to be part of. So what is it we are trying to advocate? Perhaps if I ask you about the methodology of this research, that might help us a little.
Yeah, so I think, just to refer to the question that you were just asking, so it's about supporting the employee, but also about changing the culture of the firm.
Right.
And what we do is we provide the data that the firm can use to convince its people and to build their strategy. We are usually not involved in building the strategy, but we are analyzing the data.
What would the headline be there? For instance, if you are just more sensitive listening to your employee's background, you might end up in the long run benefiting greatly because you will build the kind of loyalty or whatever. What are the outcomes here?
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things. But I think what I would like to explain first, it's the methodology, because we haven't yet talked about what the socioeconomic background means and how we get this data. So I said that we collect both the quantitative and the qualitative data. But then how do we ask about someone's background? It can be a tricky question, right? So if we can only ask one question, we ask, what was the occupation of your main household earner when you were about the age 14?
Okay.
And once we know what the occupation was, then we can divide it, we can fit it into one of the three categories. That would be higher socioeconomic backgrounds, intermediate or lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Right. And then why this question? This is because age 14 is seen as a formative time in someone's development. And the opportunities they had then has a lot of impact on what they could access in terms of education, in terms of resources, and what kind of support they could get. So, yeah, and there are other questions we could use, such as whether someone was eligible for free school meals when they were at school, or what type of school they went to. But this is a question that is applicable to the widest range of people, and it can also be applicable internationally. That's why we use that one. So I guess putting aside how we find out about people's background, it's also about why people would want to submit this data, right? Right. Because they might not want to share, or they might not want to understand why. For the world to become a better place. Yeah. But then so what is important to say is that for us, it's on the firm to explain to the employees why they are collecting this data and what is going to happen with it. And it's important to handle the data as sensitive data, because people need to be anonymized, and they also need to be aware of what's going to happen. And this is something that was discussed yesterday as well. It's about trust, and it's about the awareness of what this brings us towards, a better understanding of our workforce, and then evidence-based actions. So then what I do, I would be doing interviews together with a team. We would be interviewing 20 to 40 people from the workforce. And this would be to understand, for example, why certain things happen. So why does it take longer for people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds to progress, even though there is no evidence that they're performing worse than their colleagues?
Ola, sadly, we have extremely little time, but I still want to ask you questions. Tell me, what's the actual result of your research, in the sense that you say it's difficult to persuade people to submit their personal information? I would imagine it's also difficult to persuade leaders in corporations or consortia you're talking about to understand the potential impact of this research. Tell me about the results, the implementation, the recommendations.
Thanks. So I will share one example, which is from the financial sector. And in 2020, the City of London Corporation commissioned us to examine socioeconomic diversity in the senior levels in the financial sector. And we found things like 9 in 10 senior roles in financial services are held by people from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. And this compares to a third of the UK working population. So this is a huge difference, right?
Right.
And then we also found that employees from lower socioeconomic backgrounds take 25% longer to progress, despite no evidence of poorer performance. And partly as a result of our report, a consortium has been established called Progress Together, and they now, they try to drive socioeconomic diversity at senior levels in the financial sector. And from 2023 to 2024, there has been a growth in the proportion of people from lower socioeconomic background in senior roles, and it increased from 26 to 28%. It's not much, but when you think about the bigger picture, it's quite a bit. And then also, I think what I want to say is a mention of intersectionality, because we haven't managed to get to that yet.
Right.
So here, 77% of the members of this consortium say that their work
77.
So almost 8 in 10. They say that their work on socioeconomic diversity has positively impacted their efforts on improving gender and ethnicity diversity.
Alexandra, there are so many questions I would love to ask you and have more time for that, at least double the time we have, but who knows, maybe 10th edition of D&I Changemakers. Alexandra Kubica, a senior researcher at the Bridge Group, has been with us, and I would encourage everyone worldwide to take a look at the Bridge Group Insights and Research. Hopefully you publish a lot of that stuff along with the methodology so that other countries can relate to it and learn from the experience. Ola, it's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.